The Black Rose McQueen. I wanted to give a shout out to Ring IQ Boxing, and remember to tune in to the motherfucking relay.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this one. Dennis Hogan's promoter is confident his boxer retires Kell Brook. Section of the article reads, against Brook, Keegan feels very confident in his boxer's ability to come away with the win. Our stance is simple. Dennis is the best light middleweight in the world, Keegan told IrishBoxing.com. He proved that by not just beating Jaime Munguia, but schooling him in his own backyard. So I believe Dennis beats any light middleweight out there, and honestly, if I didn't believe that, I wouldn't say it. I did read that Kell Brook's camp would like to fight Dennis to gauge where they are at, and it made me laugh. You don't fight Dennis to gauge your next fight. You fight Dennis Hogan if you want one last swan song and to hoping to retire straight after. Keegan explains that Brook looked very ordinary and struggled when matched with a durable Michael Zarafa. Brook went 12 rounds with Michael Zarafa and looked very ordinary. Dennis beats Michael Zarafa every day of the week, so that might tell you where Brook is at, in my opinion. I don't think it helps Keegan's argument that Dennis Hogan has never actually beaten Michael Zarafa any day of the week. You know, Jeff Horn, he avenged the loss to Michael.
In the rematch.
Kell Brook, he beat him a couple of fights ago. Peter Quillen, he beat Michael back in 2014. And Arif Magomedov gave Michael his first professional loss back in 2014. But as far as Dennis has never actually done anything to Michael.
So that's a bold claim.
I don't know if Keegan knows this, but that Brook versus Zarafa fight, that was like, what, 1-2 years ago?
Yeah.
Brook's been in action since then. You know, he sat out all of 2019, but he had a fight this year.
February
2020 against Mark DeLuca. So, if Keegan is trying to gauge where Kell Brook is here today, one would assume he'd use the Mark DeLuca fight as a point of reference and not a fight from well over a year ago, going on 2. I mean, he's not wrong. Brook didn't look his best against Michael Zarafa, but he looked a man alive against Mark DeLuca. Looked sensational, even did a bit of switch hitting in that fight, and that fight was this year. So if you're trying to gauge where Brook is here today, one would assume you'd use a fight from this year and not a fight from well over a year ago. I don't think that Keegan is being completely honest with himself. I will say, I like the idea of a Brook versus Hogan fight. I'm not sure that kind of fight is to Brook's fancy, as Brook has world title aspirations on his mind.
in the welterweight division.
Pretty sure that Kell Brook's still holding out hope that he can land that Terrence Crawford fight for the WBO title at 147 pounds. And on his totem pole, the Crawford fight would rank ahead of a Dennis Hogan fight. So while I do like the idea of Brook versus Hogan,
It's a good fight.
that fight is contingent on whether or not Kell can get Terrence in the ring. Thus, Dennis Hogan will be stuck playing the waiting game. And he won't be waiting alone. Liam Smith had this to say. He said, Brook's not ducking me, but he's scared of losing to me. A portion of the article reads, Smith likened Brook's reluctance to fight him to Amir Khan's trepidation about boxing Brook in what would be a lucrative domestic showdown in the United Kingdom. I get people saying, oh, he's ducking you. Smith said to promoter Eddie Hearn as part of an Instagram live interview on Friday. He's not ducking me, and he's not scared of me. He has fought Golovkin, but I do feel he's scared of losing to me. He's a bigger name than me domestically. He's probably a bigger name than me over in the States, but he's scared to lose to me because it probably ruins what his achievements have done. And the same with Khan. I think Khan was probably the biggest domestic fighter in the UK before Anthony Joshua, you know, to make a name in the States. And I think Khan is probably scared of losing to Kell. So that's how I've always judged it as. Khan is scared of losing to Brook, and Brook's probably scared of losing to me. That's always the way I've looked at it. And you know what? There might actually be something to what Liam Smith is saying. I mean, what would it do to Kell Brook's momentum
if he lost?
What momentum he has managed to amass from 2018 into 2020. He's been sparsely active the last 2 years, and it certainly would be a critical hit if he were to lose to either Liam Smith or Dennis Hogan at 154 pounds. For that, you might as well try to make welterweight one more time in a world title fight against the likes of a Terrence Crawford instead of losing to one of these two guys, neither of which have a world title. I see Liam Smith's point about how Kell Brook is a guy who went up there and fought Gennady Golovkin. So when
He's afraid of you?
you talk about fear, you can't talk about it in the same context that you would a bunch of Joe Blows. You know, this guy, he's got some stones. He's got some cojones going up there fighting a guy like that, having had no real experience in the middleweight division. But it's not Liam Smith that he fears so much as what would losing to Liam Smith do to his career.
That's it.
That's what he fears.
That's it.
He'd rather take his chances with Terrence Crawford, and I think that, yeah, there is some truth to that. Now, I wouldn't mind seeing Kell Brook lock horns with either of these two guys at 154 pounds, which is a more comfortable weight for Kell Brook than 147. But at the end of the day, Kell Brook has world title aspirations, and in all honesty, he'd make more money fighting Terrence Crawford and losing at 147 than he would fighting either of these two guys at 154 and winning. Those are the facts.
So while these are both good fights,
Any one of them or both of them happening hinge on whether or not Kell Brook can get Terrence Crawford in the ring. And if he can, he'll put these two guys on the back burner. If he can't, then he'll have options. He'll have options to keep busy with in the junior middleweight division. And either one of these two guys, they're interchangeable.
Hogan, Smith.
You don't have to fight them in any particular order. They're both intriguing matchups. They're both solid matchups with solid junior middleweights. And I'll take either of these two fights or the both of them if Kell can't get Terrence in the ring. But fight. Let's see if he can. And if he doesn't, then he'll find time for these two guys. In other news, John Ryder had this to say. He says, ultimately, I want the rematch with Callum Smith. He's quoted as saying, I still feel like I won the fight. My anger isn't towards Callum Smith. It's the judging. I think it's ridiculous someone had it to Smith by 6 rounds. There's no way. If it had been a draw, they'd given it to Smith by 1 round. You could wipe your mouth of it and say, well, I knew I needed to get the knockout. The scorecards were just so far from the truth. It leaves a sour taste, Ryder told Sky Sports. The plan was basically to take Smith's, advantages away. His height. He's very good at his catch counter. He's very good up close. He's very good at range. So get in mid-range where he's not fighting to his strengths, outwork him, be sensible with head movement, high guard to catch the shots. Did he have a bad night or did he just box the perfect game plan? Tony's put a game plan in place and I've executed it properly. Ultimately, I want the rematch with Smith. Eddie Hearn says it can happen. There are big fights for him at super middle or light heavy. I suppose he was hoping for Canelo, but it's all up in the air. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I don't think John's going to get that rematch. And if he does, it won't be anytime in the near future. I just don't see it. Given Joe Gallagher's reaction to the mere proposition of a rematch situation post-fight, you can tell John wasn't crazy about it. We talked about it here on the channel.
Joe.
I'll leave the link to that video in the description box. But yeah, you know, John, I don't think he's going to be getting that. I don't think that Joe Gallagher and Callum Smith are going to give John that kind of situation willingly. So that leaves John looking for a dance partner, looking for someone to do something with. You know, I could really go for a John Ryder versus David Lemieux fight. Those two guys, they were supposed to fight each other last year on the undercard of Canelo versus Jacobs. David, he ended up pulling out of the fight with an injured hand, something or other. Didn't get to come off. But, you know, David Lemieux, we talked about him very recently in one of our previous videos.
He's trying to shake shit up.
David, he wants to be a busier fighter moving forward. It had been about over a year's time, between the Gary Spike O'Sullivan fight and the Maxime Berzak fight. And that inactivity caused David a bit of ring rust. It hurt his performance, and he wants to be a busier guy moving forward. Well, I'd like to see him get busy with John Ryder in the ring. It's a firefight. It's that kind of situation, you know? I mean, this is why it's important how a fighter loses. And I'm talking about John Ryder here, you know.
It matters.
This is why what you put forth.
It matters.
There were a lot of people out there that don't even think John lost that fight. There were a lot of people out there that think John won that fight.
Quite a few.
And that matters because that's what determines whether or not those people, those spectators in what is a spectator sport, want to see you box again. Comes to John, I think he can create a lot of excitement for himself, a lot of momentum devoid of a Callum Smith rematch. One guy he could do it with is David Lemieux. Yet another guy, another potential opponent option, is the newbie to the weight, former middleweight champion, Daniel Jacobs. I could very much go for a Jacobs versus Ryder fight.
It's a good fucking fight.
And this is why what you put forth, what you exhibit, how you perform, this is why it matters in victory or defeat.
It matters.
You don't want to go out there and put on a showing like an Adrian Broner, to where you land these high-level situations, but you don't perform like a high-level boxer. Okay, after a showing like that, people aren't going to want nothing to do with you. This guy landed a Mikey Garcia fight before anybody. Goes out there, does absolutely nothing. Somehow, he manages to land a Pacquiao fight thereafter. And once again, he manages to do absolutely nothing.
On pay-per-view.
You don't want to be that guy. Whereas with John, he went out there against Callum Smith in what was a world title fight, a world title opportunity, and he put forth a solid showing, a solid enough showing that people walked away from the fight thinking, you know what? The judges got it wrong, and John won the fight. This is the kind of loss that if you're going to suffer a loss, this is the kind of loss you want to suffer as. This will keep you in the running. This will keep you in the conversations for the intriguing matchups, the big fights. And I think that John
He did good.
has definitely established himself as a player in the super middleweight division in defeat. So I think the future has more in store for him. And finally, Tyson Fury had this to say. He says, "I've achieved more than any active heavyweight alive." He was quoted as saying, "I've achieved more than any active heavyweight alive today. No one can come close to what I've achieved. I'm happy with where I am in my career and what I'm doing. If I never have another boxing fight, I'll be happy. I've completed the game," Fury said to Sky Sports. "I won every single belt in boxing, from the English title to becoming the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. All done, all finished, considered the best, done. If I don't box again, I'm happy, but if I do box again, then I continue to box." If we get past this thing, which we hopefully will, then we're going to keep boxing and just keep taking on contenders. Klitschko did it until he was 40. A lot of the great champions are continuing and continuing. I ain't boxing for money. I ain't boxing for fame. I ain't boxing for a belt. I'm boxing because it keeps me mentally happy and I like to do it. Nothing to prove to anyone. Not one thing to prove at all. But I box now because I love boxing and I've been doing it all my life. Why walk away when I'm still only young? Hopefully I box until I have a good sit down with all the team and we all decide it's time to walk away while I'm on top and then sail away into the sunset. And then who knows what will happen after that. Let me stop you right there. Tyson Fury is not, nor has he ever been, an undisputed champion. He has never been in simultaneous possession of all the belts, and that's what it takes to be an undisputed champion. You have to hold all of them at the same time.
Not sporadically.
I mean, this isn't a collage we're talking about here, to where we factor in the belts you held with the only belt that you currently hold, or the only belts that you currently hold. Currently, Tyson Fury's in possession of the Ring Magazine and WBC titles, and that's all well and good. Congratulations to him. It was a sensational victory. But there's a big difference between holding those two world titles
now
and holding all of them. Holding all of them will require Tyson Fury to lock horns with Anthony Joshua. And if he wins that fight, then he can call himself an undisputed champion. But I reiterate, Tyson Fury is not, nor has he ever been, an undisputed champion. He may have been a unified champion at one point in his career, and currently he might be the Ring Magazine and WBC champion, but at no point in Tyson Fury's career was he ever the undisputed champion. And if you want to know why I stress this, it's because of the significance of being an undisputed champion, let alone a reigning undisputed champion. For all Tyson Fury's accomplishments, his reign, or reigns, as a titleist, they've never lasted very long. Immediately after he beat Vladimir Klitschko and became a unified champion, what did he do? He absconded. He never defended any of the belts he was in possession of. He relinquished them.
Right after.
Now here today, he's going into a rubber match with Deontay Wilder in defense of his Ring Magazine and WBC title. But this is literally the first title defense Tyson Fury will have ever made of any title he's ever held in his entire career. There's a difference between this and being an undisputed champion, because being an undisputed champion is a bigger responsibility. You're going to have mandatories up the wazoo. Any and everybody climbing up those ranks is coming after you. And in order to remain an undisputed champion, you've no choice but to take on all comers. Imagine an environment to where, I don't know, you got Daniel Dubois as your mandatory challenger via the WBA. And then you got Hrgovic or Dillian White as your mandatory challenger via the WBC. You got Tony Yoka via the IBF, and you got nutcases like
the unrapeable one, Arslanbek Mahmudov,
or Abdi Daftaev. Just imagine an environment to where you're in possession of every single world title that all these different contenders aspire to gain, aspire to pry away from you. Just imagine that responsibility and being able to fulfill that responsibility.
Repetition.
Fulfill the obligations that come with being not just a champion, not just a unified champion, but an undisputed champion. And Tyson Fury here today is laying claim to that responsibility when he's never defended a single title that he's ever held. Not one. Not once. Now, perhaps we can say that Tyson Fury is one of the most accomplished British boxers we've ever seen. I mean, I think there's room for that kind of a conversation. We've talked about it here on the channel. But in the greater scheme of things, when we expand our horizons, Tyson Fury's calling himself an undisputed champion when that's never been the case.
Never.
It's a very clear-cut definition between being a champion, a unified champion, and an undisputed champion. And because you held some belts before, doesn't mean you're holding them now, so how are you undisputed?
Is that a Freudian slip?
Does Tyson Fury consider himself to be an undisputed champion?
Because he's not.
I mean, what is this? Is this some kind of device to skirt around the Anthony Joshua fight? Is that what this is? That I don't need to fight that guy for those belts that I used to hold because I used to hold them.
Oh.
Well, yeah, you did, but you don't hold them now. And you've never fought this guy before. Oh, you sparred him. I know. It's professional boxing. A lot of people spar each other, but we're talking about a professional boxing match, not a professional sparring match. We're talking about a fight on the biggest stage British boxing has ever seen for the biggest prize that professional prize fighting holds. Not just undisputed in some weight class, some other division. Undisputed in the granddaddy of all weight classes, the most glamorous of the glamour weights.
The heavyweight division.
Is Tyson Fury beginning to once again buckle under the pressure of expectations that he's expected to make his way past Deontay Wilder yet again, but afterwards there are more expectation. There is an expectation of Tyson Fury to lock horns with Anthony Joshua. Just once, but perhaps twice. And afterwards, what obligations he must fulfill if he is successful as an undisputed champion. Is the thought of this beginning to make Tyson Fury buckle under the pressure the way he once did when he was pressured to give Vladimir Klitschko his rematch? The rematch that he never actually gave him. Is Tyson Fury beginning to once again buckle under the pressure? Because I can't, for the life of me, understand why he categorized himself as an undisputed champion. You've never been undisputed. You've been unified. You're a two-time heavyweight champion, and all of that is very good. Congratulations. Nothing against him. But if we're gonna stick to the facts, Tyson Fury's never been undisputed, so why is he calling himself that?